Hi and welcome to MSc. In this video we're going to be looking at performing a quadratic regression on the TI-84 plus CE. Now I'm going to do this for a quadratic regression, but really the technique is very similar regardless what type of curve you're trying to reproduce from data. So on this type of problem you're typically given a table of values. Right. Or you're collecting data and you're getting your independent and your dependent variables. And the first step is always inputting them into the calculator. And this can be a little tedious and time consuming, but obviously it's important that the calculator knows what data points it's trying to match a curve to. The way this is done is through the stat function. So it's under stat, and then you want to go in and edit. So it's already on one. You can either hit 1 or hit enter. And I've already inputted some data here. This is going to follow a general quadratic form. And this is where the L1 is your x values. You'd input x values here, and you'd input the L2 values, your y values, in the column next to it. Of course, you can have more data and use the same x values over and over for different data sets if you're trying to do multiple regressions. So once that's done, then what we can do, which I find is a bit of an optional step, really, in actually producing the regression, but it is a very, very helpful step. And so this is where we're going to plot just this data as points. And if you look at the graph, there's nothing there because I have nothing in my y1 yet, right? So let's have it plot just the data that we input under stat edit. So how we do that is we go second function, and then we go up to the y equals, which is stat plot. And you can see stat plot 1 is turned off, and we want to turn that on. So we'll hit enter to access it, and now we'll toggle that over to on. We'll see the different types of graphs that we can produce. We definitely want the dots here, and we're accessing L1 and L2. That's where I could change it to a different list if I wanted to. The lists are all second function values down here on the keypad. I can also change what it looks like and stuff like that. We don't need to worry about any of that. Then we can actually get it to graph that. I think if we just click on the graph, you can see it only one was in the window setting that we have, but that's one of the points that we had. So now what we can look at is going into zoom, and under 9 it's zoom stat, and this is going to fit to our data that we've input. So there's the data, and you can see it follows a parabola because it's quadratic data. So what's nice about doing this is when we actually plot our curve or our quadratic that's going to fit this data, the window settings are already all taken care of for us, so we can see visually that it's going to go through the dots that we have. So to actually do the regression, it's back under stat again, and then we're actually going to go over to calc. So we go over to calc, and then here you can see we have linear regression, quadratic, cubic, quartic. We have all sorts of other ones down below as well, and you can sort through those and find all sorts of different sign regressions and everything. What we want for this set is the quadratic. So we'd hit 5 or hit enter on it. And this is again where we get to pick. The x values are my L1s and the y values are my L2s. And I could change the y values if I had multiple data sets. The other piece that is important here, and I'm going to leave the frequency list alone for this video, but we actually can store the regression so that when we do the regression, it doesn't just calculate it. So if I went to calculate without storing it, there's the data. I have to write that down, but it's not going to graph it for me, right? It's right there. So let's go back in and actually make it store this data for me. So back under stat over to calc, quadratic regression. I do want L1 and L2, but I want to actually store this data. Now there's a couple of ways to access. What we want to store here is it in y1 or whatever y equation you'd like to use. If y1 was already filled with something else, you'd choose y2. There's a couple of ways to access this. One's through the variable button, but another one is through the alpha trace, this F4 button, and then you can pick and choose which one you'd like. We're going to use 1, so I can either hit 1 or enter, and it will put y1 there. And then I'm going to go down to calculate, and you notice our screen looks just like it did before. And maybe I'd want to write these values down. Maybe I'd want to round them all to 3 significant figures. And again, that's quite common for different programs like International Baccalaureate, for example. If I go to my graph now, what's nice is it's plotted for me. It's already zoomed in nicely because we went through the zoom stat, and I can see that, hey, this fits the data pretty well, right? And in reality, you might have some points that don't fall perfectly on the line. but this obviously was designed to fit very well a parabola. What's cool now, though, is that if I went to y1, I can see my quadratic regression here, and it's all stored for me. And if I'm looking for when it intersects or zeros or whatever, all the maximum of the quadratic, I can do all that work now without having to go through and manually enter this. It's all right there for me to be able to work with the graph. So hopefully this short video on regression, specifically quadratic regression, has been helpful. If it has, please like the video and consider subscribing to the channel. And as always, thank you very much for listening and watching.